Hey everybody, hope you're doing okay. Last time I talked to you, we were talking about Herbert Spencer. Life's been crazy, as you know, for all you guys. I get stuck up here in my office for seems like days at a time. This is way, way, way more involved than it is doing this live. But anyway, and we talked about Herbert Spencer, and now we want to get into. I want to do a little something with Marx, Karl Marx. And uh, you know, to do this, I want to try and do it in some segments, and I want to try to keep these segments to kind of a manageable time. I don't want to make them make them too long for you at once. Okay. But let's before we start actually talking about Karl Marx, let's put him into some context first. We began the whole course with the idea of the classical tradition of sociology. And we said that, well, within that classical tradition, this body of 19th century, primarily 19th century and early 20th century literature, sociological writing, it would include the works of people like Emil Durkheim and Max Weber, Herbert Spencer, and others, George Simmel, and a whole bunch of them. And if we take all those writers and we think about them all together, that sociologists usually agree that this pioneering tradition of sociology would always have to include what I called in the very beginning the Holy Trinity, right, of sociology, which would be Karl Marx and Max Weber and Emil Durkheim. And that we read some C. Wright Mills, where he talks about the classical tradition. And one of the ideas we get from Mills's work is the notion of the Marxian watershed, right? That Marx comes along, and love him or hate him, agree with him or disagree with him, right? Um, Marx comes along and really changes the direction of social science, changes the course of social science. And Mills talked about something he called the Marxian watershed. And then I even said, as others have done, that all sociology subsequent to Marx has been a debate with Marx's ghost, right? So again, love him or hate him, he's important. That his work is has driven the debate, I think, in sociology, especially in macro sociology. Um, we can think of Emil Durkheim, right, as being involved in that debate with Marx's ghost, and we can think of Max Weber as being involved in that debate with Marx's ghost. And so now we need to talk about, Marx, but still to maybe understand him, in the context of classical theory, that Ashley and Orenstein say that one of the things that makes classical sociology classic, one of the defining characteristics of classical sociology is that it has ideological significance, right? So we talked about Herbert Spencer, and Herbert Spencer is the defender of capitalism, right? The defender of capitalism, the defender of laissez-faire capitalism. And Emil Durkheim, talking not so much about capitalism, but about industrialization and about modernization, and even suggesting reforms. So we have the staunch conservative defender of laissez-faire capitalism in Herbert Spencer. We have maybe the kind of reformer, in Emil Durkheim. And now we're going to get Karl Marx, right? The revolutionary, the socialist revolutionary, a radical revolutionary. Now, one of the things that all of these guys have in common, even going back even further, going back to Auguste Comte, right? And thinking about Emil Durkheim, and thinking about Herbert Spencer, and thinking about Max Weber, is one of the things they all had in common is science, right? A belief in, or a belief in science, right? A belief that we can know things through science, and you know, what is the purpose, right, behind scientific, social scientific knowledge, right? Well, for Durkheim, it's going to be um, uh, uh, social science, positivism in the service of reform, right? For Herbert Spencer, it's going to be positivism, social science in the service of the defense of capitalism, right? Um, to try to prove that we shouldn't be touching things, we shouldn't be messing with things. And then you're going to get Karl Marx, and Karl Marx is also going to talk about science, but he's not going to talk about positivism. He's going to talk about something he calls scientific socialism, right? You know, still the idea of science, very important in there, but we got those two words together, scientific socialism. Well, now it's going to be for him science, right, that is value relevant in the service of revolution. Okay, not reform, but revolution. So where do we go from there? Well, I just want to, again, finish up this first little segment by way of introduction before we get into some of his work. And so what we're going to be doing is we're talking about Karl Marx, right? But we don't want to forget his friend Friedrich Engels. So we have Karl Marx, 1818 to 1883, and we have Friedrich Engels, 1820 to 1895. So we are as much talking about the Marxian tradition as we are talking about Karl Marx himself, because I think, you know, Friedrich Engels gets some short shrift here. He gets the short end of the stick. I think he tends to be ignored, but he was important, and it was important for a lot of reasons. You know, before we talk about Marx, well, let's say a little something about Engels. So Engels lived from 1820 to 1820 to 1895. And he was important because he was a collaborator of Marx, right? So they cooperated together. They co-authored a lot of stuff. They worked very closely together. Um, Engels, you know, Marx was supported by Engels, you know, so that Marx could give full time to his intellectual pursuits. Engels, who had a little bit of scratch, right, was able to support Marx, edited his work, you know, and even, believe it or not, even took the blame for Marx's illegitimate child that he had with his housekeeper. And so Marx took the blame so he wouldn't get in trouble with his wife and stuff, you know. So that's kind of a pal, right? That's a buddy. But Engels, right? Engels wrote some very important things of his own too. And out of Marx, and between Marx and Engels, we're going to get tons and tons of stuff. And so we can't talk about it all, but we can mention some of it. So from Friedrich Engels, we're going to have The Condition of the Working Class in England is going to be one of his more important works that came out in 1845. And we're going to get another work from Friedrich Engels, The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State, that was published in 1884, among other things. Engels edited a lot, like I said, edited a lot of Marx's work, and after Marx died, even posthumously arranged a lot of the notes and everything from Marx's work and finished some of the things that he had started. We have Karl Marx, right? And again, a whole ton of stuff from Karl Marx. But some of his more important works include The German Ideology in 1845. We're going to have, actually written between 1845 and 1846. And we're going to have some quotes from The German Ideology. We get his most famous work, maybe not his best work, but one of his more famous works is the Communist Manifesto, or the Manifesto of the Communist Party, that was published in 1848. It was actually, hold on here a second. I have a little timer to keep myself on track. I'm going just a little bit over. The Communist Manifesto in 1848, not his best work, like I said, but one of his more popular works. Okay, and one of the reasons it's not maybe his best work was because it was written as a kind of a political pamphlet. So it isn't, as we could maybe say, academically as sophisticated as some of his other things, because its purpose was different. Its purpose was to sort of inspire political action. But there are some very important ideas that he kind of crystallizes in very simple ways in the Communist Manifesto. We have another of his works called A Contribution to the Critique of Political Economy, which was published in 1858. And then we have his his big work, Das Kapital, or simply called Capital. It came out in 3 volumes. Some people say 4, and I'll explain why in a second. Capital, the first volume of Capital, written by Marx, published in 1867. And then Marx died in 1883, and Engels, takes these manuscripts and he edits them and cleans them up, and they published then 2 more volumes of Capital. So we have the first 3 volumes of Capital, and then we finally get Engels takes some more of Marx's notes on surplus value and publishes them as some people say a 4th volume of Capital. So that's a little bit of background on Marx. And again, before I go too long, I'm going to cut myself off right here, and we're going to get ready now to start talking about Marx's work. Okay, so I'll be right back.